Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
I don't know.
You have to have a favorite. What comes to mind?
You are listening to Scream with Ryan C. Showers, the podcast for Scream fans just like you. Join Ryan every week as he takes a deep dive into the horror film series that defined the 90s and redefined the genre. Scream with Ryan C. Showers is your source for scene and quote analysis, character dissections, and the latest news about upcoming installments of the Scary Movie franchise.
I hear you like horror movies, Kirby, but do you like them as much as him?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Scream with Ryan C. Showers. I'm your host, Ryan C. Showers. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. Before we get started with the show, I need to thank the producers of Scream with Ryan C. Showers, TJ Jones, who does all of the graphic design work for the episode title cards, and Ashley Summers, who helps me manage the show in various ways, including our Scream Game of the Week every Wednesday on Instagram, and the frequent Taylor Swift Song of the Day. If you haven't subscribed on Patreon, I'm Scream with RCS. This show is brought to you by Patreon support, and I greatly appreciate everyone who subscribes. If you would like to be a guest on the show, either in our monthly group Zoom episodes or smaller group or one-on-one discussions with me, head on over to Patreon and subscribe. The Patreon also includes social media communities, particular on Instagram. That is the hub of the Patreon and the podcast. In addition, you get the monthly audio commentary. So every month I record an audio commentary that is for subscribers only. Right now, we are going to be working through the 4 Scream films directed by Wes Craven. So please subscribe to the Patreon and check out the audio commentaries. One of the best things about the podcast are the spec scripts written by Joey Valisi, LA Times bestselling writer of It Came From the Closet, Queer Reflections on Horror. He wrote a first script in Scream 7, which was released way back in 2023. It's episode 112. It imagines the ending of the Carpenter sister storyline and also recenters the focus on Sidney. Then episode 155 is Screams, which is a Gale Weathers-centric script that also features Sidney and Kirby. We are coming to you with the final script written by Joey Valisi, the final Scream, which is going to premiere on this podcast on December 19th. It imagines what conclusion to this little trilogy of ours would be if we focused on Sidney's family, say Sidney and Mark Kincaid. In the real Scream 7, she is married to Mark Evans, but in our script, she is still married to Mark Kincaid. So everyone, please tune in. A final girl for the final time. It's the final Scream written by Joe Valisi, premiering December 19th on this podcast. The script will be available on Patreon for subscribers tier 2 and above. Lastly, I need to thank everyone who is subscribed at Patreon at the Daddy Ghostface or Stab Investor tier. My mama at Ghostface is Carrie Tenney, and my daddy Ghostfaces are Corey Wilson and Brett Janovich. My Stab Investors include Kevin Abner, Ali, Roy Garza, Josh Carr, Amar Karim, P.W05, aka Philip Douglas, Gustavo Mora, Mark Vieira, Joey Nabrini, aka The Vault, David D, Scream Queens podcast, both Justine and Josh, Jess Mariano, Sam Levy, Tamika Jones, Josh Calamari, and Andrew Dominguez. Thank you guys so much. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Scream with Ryan C. Showers. I'm your host, Ryan C. Showers. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode. This is the first episode of December. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to everybody. I do want to welcome a few new Patreons. I need to welcome Sean. I need to welcome Cal Penn Lynn, Kyle Kavanaugh, and a new Stab investor, Andrew Dominguez. So, everybody, thank you for joining the Patreon. I sincerely, greatly appreciate you supporting my show. So, with that out of the way, let us now transition into our main topic of the week. So this is the Scream topic of the week. On Friday, we're going to have a review of Wicked for Good. Yes, this is a Scream podcast. No, that's not a Scream topic. I don't care. But for today's episode, we are going to be covering Scream 7. And, you know, I have been the biggest cheerleader for Scream 7, basically from November 22nd, 2023 until today. And I still am. But, you know, just to be fair, just to show objectivity, I think it's important for us to talk about, you know, as much as we're anticipating it, as much as things could go right, there is an element of things that could go wrong. So with that being said, I am joined by 2 people in this episode who have been along the journey with me, anticipating Scream 7, being excited for it, but I think we're going to shed some objectivity here and just kind of expose what our fears are. So for the introduction here, everyone, please welcome my friend Anthony. Hey, Anthony.
Hey, Ryan. How's it going? I'm so happy to be here.
I'm well. It's nice to see you.
You too.
So, Anthony, please tell me, like, you're going to be the first one we hear from
Okay.
today. So, what are you most afraid of as it pertains to Scream 7? Mistakes that it could make, or just general fears you have where it could prevent it from being the most fulfilled vision of the story you want to see?
Of course, so I have a few things. My first thing is, listen, I have all the faith in Kevin Williamson, but it's just nostalgia is really hard to not feed into. And I'm just concerned because whether you like the way they did it or not, we just did the requel with Radio Silence, and we did have a bunch of throwbacks. So now that we're getting closer to the release, we have some actors and actresses who are promoting other projects, and they're getting asked about Scream 7. And, I know Michelle Randolph was just interviewed for her second season of Landman, and she said, I'm so happy Kevin's back. There's going to be a lot of nods and throwbacks to the original. So I'm okay with it. I just hope that it's done in service of the story and not just a wink wink. I love Halloween 2018, but one of the things that irked me the most about the Easter egg is when Laurie called Michael the Shape. I know for so many people it's so little, but for me it's like the only reason she called him the Shape is because he was credited as the Shape. It had nothing to do with within the story. Loomis never called him that. It was never in universe. It's just a wink wink to the audience members. It wasn't real for the character. So that, I just want to be healthy with the Easter egg. So I want him to go back and be clever. Maybe, he did do a treatment for Halloween H show. I love the Easter egg of Laurie opening the closet door and being like, oh, fuck, in Halloween H show. Like natural stuff like that I'm about. So I'm just hoping they toe that line and just make it feel organic and natural and part of the story, and not just a wink wink, here we go, because we've done that already in Scream, and we've done throwbacks with even Wes's movie with Scream 4. We've done throwbacks to the OG, but that felt part of the story. So if he can do it like that and just move the story forward, because we already know we're going to be dealing with Sidney's past because of this supposed AI or whatever, these killers coming back. So I feel like that alone is enough, but I get he's going to go back to his OG and give throwbacks and give the nostalgia feels, but I just want him to be smart about it. So I want to move forward. I want us to keep moving forward and not live in the past forever. And I think that's a good sign that we see Stu's house burning down as a sign that he's going to throw back, but we're going to move forward. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but I think Kevin will pull it up. But I'm a little nervous about the Easter eggs.
So this is something that the main episode, so Anthony and I are just doing the warm up here. The main portion of the episode is between me and our good friend Jess Melendez. And this is actually something we didn't talk about. We talked for over an hour and a half, and the Easter eggs did not get brought up. And with that being said, though, that is something I'm actually genuinely afraid of, because that is the culture of the moment, right? Is the wink, wink, nudge, nudge, throwback. Look how cute we're being. And like you said, we've been there, done that. And I really want to be done with that. And like what you bring up about the Shape, that's a terrible example in terms of being something that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, 100%. So I think Kevin's smart enough, but again, it's really hard to resist that urge, especially when you have studios down your neck too. And you have to sell tickets. So it's nostalgia's the name of the game, but I hope we're good. I just hope he doesn't rely on it. And that's it. So I want to move the story forward.
You're right, though, in terms of like, we've already done this with Scream 4. Like, we've already in 4, and then again in 5, and then 6 kind of was still an homage to the original, and 2, right? It's just like, when is enough going to be enough? And I think that, like, I actually could see this happening because of the pure fact that this is Kevin's first outing, and the fact that Neve is coming back, and like I think they're going to sell this as like a coming home reunion movie. And how do you not go there when that is part of your pitch?
Right. So, I hope we move forward, but that's a big concern of mine. And I also I love Skeet Ulrich, but I don't want to see it. I think that the way to go for him is if he's taunting with Sidney, just voiceover. And I don't need to see him in the flesh anymore. He just got his Sam, father, daughter in 5 and 6. So let him go off into the sunset and be done with Scream. He got his time coming back from the dead, for better, for lack of a better term, that's what they did. They brought him back to be visually there for Sam. So I don't mind in Scream 3 when she's sitting in that room and he's like in her head, they're with the throwback when she's in Scream 3 sitting in her bed and she hears him in her head. But I don't need to see him. I don't need her to see visions of Billy. It can be a phone call. It can be AI, but I don't need to see him taunt her. I'm very nervous about that.
Are you nervous about potential Sidney visions that are similar to Sam's?
I actually love the dream sequence in Scream 3, so something like that would be fine. But for some reason, the Sam stuff, it felt a little hokey, the Billy stuff.
And because we just did that with Sam,
right?
It would feel, I think it could work. It could be fun. But at the same time, I don't want this to be a copycat of 5 and 6.
Right.
in any shape, way, or form. And that gives me pause, even like, with you mentioned the Mocker House. I like the idea for the opening, and I think it could be cool. But at the same time, it doesn't it feel like we were just there. We
Right.
spent, I don't know. So that is just an objective, potential red flag to have,
I'm just hoping it's literally burnt all down in the opening and we're finally forever done, which it looks like. I mean, I'm theorizing that is the opening when he's walking away. So I think we're good. Another thing, a big pet peeve I've had of 5, but mostly 6, and you know where I'm going with this. I would be called a hypocrite if I'd say I don't know if anyone's gonna die in this one,
Mhm.
but if you're going the safe route and keeping everyone alive, they cannot they cannot have death scenes and live, which is what happened in 5 a couple times and all of 6. Gale had a death scene, Chad had a death scene, Mindy had a death scene. I would say Tara is getting stabbed and running around. Kirby had a death, like everyone had pretty much a death scene, but nobody died. So
Mhm.
if you're gonna want to keep these characters around for maybe a core 4 reunion in the future, I do personally think that Chad and Mindy or Chad or Mindy should go.
Mhm.
I don't think we should play it safe. But if you're gonna bring these characters back and keep them alive, they can be taunted and chased, and they can be in peril. But you don't give them an actual death scene and have them live. You know, give them a slice, or let's have the chase scenes. I want the suspense. I
Yeah.
don't need them to get killed off just to find out they're not dead. That was just too much with 5 and 6. I'm just nervous that they're gonna want to keep it violent and have. Mindy get stabbed a bunch of times, and then at the same thing, she's running around at the end. I can't have that anymore. So if they're gonna keep everyone alive, just go with the suspense and the scares and don't resort to having a fake death scene. I can't do that anymore.
It feels like we do not want a been there, done that.
Yeah,
And like
over
that's
it.
I feel like with 5 and 6, there is a kind of exhaustion
Mm,
with some of the tropes that they use, the Easter eggs, the excessive violence without a resulting consequence, death scene,
right.
like those things, the humor. I think like all of that, there is a certain fatigue from that, and it's crazy to me that we have a fatigue considering we haven't had a movie in 3 years. So I think that it would be best for Kevin to avoid all of that stuff. And really, just I think the best thing is to keep it fresh and keep it original. I think that keeping Chad and Mindy, specifically those two characters, there's no reason to even stab them if you're not going to kill them in
Exactly.
this. Like they should be just there for plot or there for Gale, there for comedic relief, whatever. But if you're not going to kill them, don't put them in a slight position to even get a slice. In my opinion, I think just because of the nature of Scream 6 and how everything went down and the wounds there, if that makes sense, for lack of a better phrase, no pun intended.
100%. If you're not gonna do it, don't do it. You can be scary and have I mean, Sidney was chased a bunch throughout the original trilogy, and she's here. Gale had that iconic chase scene in 2. We can be scary and put these characters in danger, but if you're not gonna kill them, don't, don't kill them and
Right.
don't fake kill them. So
Yeah.
that's that. Alright, I'm gonna go to Gale now.
Mm.
I don't want I'm just nervous because I think 5, she was very supporting, but she was used great. I don't want her to be throwaway. I know this is the return to Sydney, but I'm not nervous because of the trailer because I know it was one trailer and we really want the focus on the emotion of mother-daughter, but I don't want Gail to be treated as like she is just as much important. Sydney's my favorite, but she's just as important. So I don't want her to be treated like a throwaway. I really do want her to be a co-lead. I
Mhm.
know she requests her shorter filming schedule, but I mean, I believe in Kevin that he loves that character and her and Sydney are going to have a really big arc together, hopefully at least in like the second act, all of them, but I really don't want her to just be a guest star. I don't want her to feel like a guest star. I want her to feel integral to the story. And I'm just nervous that we're gonna get, I love it. We're gonna get the Gale one-liner. She's gonna have one badass scene and then like so peace out. I really think that you're doing a disservice to that character, especially after 6, if you don't take care of her to rebuild her. And I really want her to feel the emotion with Sydney and deal with Dewey's death, deal with what's going on. Like go through this together as the sisters that they are now. I don't want Gale to feel like I have to pop in because I'm Gale Weathers and that's it.
So you said the emotions, which I really like that word as it pertains to her, because that's just something that really wasn't there with 6. And like I think that like they have to fix her in 7, and I think the emotional aspect of Gale cannot be neglected this time.
I just hope it doesn't go too hokey with the AI stuff in the finale, but we'll see.
Yeah. And the AI stuff being hokey, that's a risk. One time over the summer, my producer TJ, he said he was afraid about the AI stuff being so central to the plot because, AI is changing and evolving so quickly. And like, will it look differently in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and then thus make Scream 7 look
Right.
dated. And that's a real fear.
Again, they can't rely on the nostalgia of past killers alone, but this new killer has to stand with them and it be like just as menacing and just using that to taunt them. I don't want I don't want it to feel like the AI, the past killers are the main killer. And then we get to the reveal, it's like, oh, wah. Like, you know what I mean? I just wanted to really build up to like, holy shit, like who's doing this to Sidney and her family?
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Do you have any other points you want to share?
I'm just also nervous of this landscape. I'm very confident in Kevin, but I'm really nervous of, I hope that they took Nev's concerns to heart and we really get back to the suspense and the chase and the build up. And I love killing. It's a slasher movie. I love the kills, but Scream was never really about the kill. It's how you get to the kill.
Right.
So I want to make sure we really focus on that and we don't get the cheap, let's just get the quick gory kill and move on, because it feels, specifically in this franchise, it makes it feel cheap to me.
Yeah. No, and I think, and also just balancing, there's only so much Nev and Kevin can do, right?
Right.
Versus what the studio tells them to do. There's only so much they can advocate for and be creative around their parameters. I mean, that is a concern too. But
I think we're in good hands, but those are my main concerns, but I'm being positive.
yeah, totally. So, well, Anthony, thank you so much. Please tell everybody where they can find you online.
Yeah, you can find me on my podcast, Never Split Up Pod. Follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube. And then I'm just Anthony Dapuzzo on X.
Awesome. Thanks, Anthony.
Thanks.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Scream with Ryan C. Showers. I'm your host, Ryan C. Showers, and today it isn't just Scream with Ryan C. Showers. It is Scream with Ryan and Jess. So everybody, please welcome my dear friend, Jess Melendez. Hey, Jess.
Hey, Ryan. How you doing?
I'm wonderful. This is fun, doing a little one-on-one time with Ryan and Jess. This is fun.
Yeah, very, especially with today's topic.
Well, so Jess, one thing I've been thinking about recently, since I feel like everyone is kind of getting the buzz back for Scream 7. And I was such like a loyal trooper for Neve and for Sidney and for this movie continuing. And I feel like, I've been very, very positive. And just to be like perfectly clear, like, just because we have all of the right ingredients doesn't mean like I don't have some fears. And, so I do think it's healthy for us to kind of think through these things and talk about them because it's as much as we all want this movie to be great, like there are some things where I'm kind of afraid, like, what if Scream can't measure up to the way it used to be, like it was with the original trilogy or even 4? What if there is something about, what if there are things about Scream 7 and expectations that we have that aren't achievable? So today, Jess and I are going to be talking about what we are most afraid about when it comes to Scream 7 in terms of potential weaknesses it could have as an individual movie or as part of this legacy. And a lot of it's influenced, I guess, by our expectations. But, and like this idea of like those of us disappointed by recent entries, whether it's just Scream 6 like me, whether it's 5 and 6 together like Jess, or, some people who want to take it back to the original trilogy, or even just Scream 1 and 2, the people who don't like Scream 3, there is such an expectation on this because this is all of the pieces together. You have Neve and Courtney. You have, this idea of like a mother-daughter storyline. You have the original writer inheriting the director's chair, and he's writing again in a real way. There's so much that could go right with Scream 7. But, let's just be objective here. There are some things that could go wrong. So, there's that movie, there's the play, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? So I feel like Who's Afraid of Scream 7 with Ryan and Jess? That's the episode today. So, Jess, what are you most afraid about when it comes to Scream 7? Thoughts?
Yeah. Given the topic, I know it's weird that I said this is kind of fun, but it is fun for me because I like analyzing, whatever topic, especially when you love it so much. But for me, I think the biggest fail that could come from this movie on the top of my list would be that they're not doing anything meaningful with Sidney. I think that's everyone's fear, that there's not going to be an arc or a build up to an arc or something new for us to attach to instead of just what they try to do in a lot of these movies, sort of like arbitrary or meaningless or just like kind of symbols of progress, but like there's no meaningful interaction with them.
So just going off of this, I'm not throwing shade at Scream 4 because I'm in a Scream 4 era. I did an episode last month where, I did this is a big epic thing about Scream 3 and 4 and like how they're the underrated sequels. So I'm loving Scream 4 and I love Sidney in Scream 4. I love Neve in her acting and the way she approaches Sidney in Scream 4. It's so different from what she does in the first 3 movies. However, objectively, one could look at Sidney in Scream 4 and think, she doesn't really change so much. We don't really know so much about what's going on with her outside of just the plot, if that makes sense. We don't know like where she's living. We don't know if she has a boyfriend. We don't know, how she lives. We just, because she's in Woodsboro just temporarily, and we just see her interacting, on a surface level in some ways. And Neve brings a lot of depth to it. It's complicated, but, one could look at Sidney in Scream 4 and think that it's a lighter version of Sidney. And I think that would be a definite fear of mine. Like, I think that, like, for Scream 7 to be successful, like, let's just take it to like your comparisons. In the trailer episode, you said H2O works. We can excuse the look of H2O because of the writing with Laurie Strode and that arc that Laurie Strode has. And I feel like the similar thing with Sidney, I don't care about anything else in Scream 7. If they don't get Sidney right, if there isn't a successful finale with Sidney, if there isn't a successful emotional change with Sidney, if Sidney doesn't deliver, I think Scream 7 will not have been a worthy venture. Jess?
I 100% agree. And I think that, because even thinking to 4, I've always thought of that as, because I always felt the same way. For me, I feel like Neve was giving, this is Sidney healed if
Yes.
the other movies didn't happen. Because that's what it feels like. It feels like a return to where we left her, just before everything went awry in the first movie. And I think she did a brilliant job at that, but that might be a little bit too subtle,
Yeah.
And also, I think, with that movie, the legacy was more so the old guard. Right.
Yeah.
The point wasn't really necessarily to advance, but to defend. And in this movie, I really do hope that we get some advancement. And like, for me, part of that kind of has to land. And I'm scared to say it because I'm not a big Joel McHale fan. Not that I think he's bad. I've seen him in like very limited, like dramatic work. That's not comedy. I think that their relationship, Sidney and Mark, has to work.
Yeah.
Because we've been pigeonholed into Sidney is married. Sidney has kids because of, radio silence. And so now this has to feel like her world, right? It has to be well established so we care about it. And that's where another like fear comes for me, because like we don't know what their chemistry is like. We don't see them in the trailer together that much. And at least with Kincaid, that relationship, both of those actors knew how to bring the depth. The subtext was like dripping between both of them about what connects them, which is trauma.
Yeah.
And it makes me sad that, I don't really know what draws, I guess, Sidney to this new Mark, and what that relationship would be like.
And that is a fear. I mean, like, that is the fear of the unknown, and like the fear of like, it's untested, so we don't know what to expect from it. And so let's just, let's pick at an old wound here. Because, like, this is something that I have not dealt with, okay? And it's something that other people haven't dealt with. Like, for me, whenever this was announced in January, I accepted it and I moved on just because I had to. Like, there was no time to mourn. And I did an episode about it. I did like a little 20 minutes on it and I talked it through and whatever. But, like, the idea that we were promised a Mark Kincaid marriage and we didn't get that, that they didn't deliver that. And instead we're getting a new Mark. I'm a big Sidney and Mark fan in terms of what Scream 3 could have been. And I kind of resent Radio Silence for pushing that in our faces if they couldn't deliver on the promise. Today, I released an episode about who is the leader of the franchise and how it could really only be Neve at this point. And I think this kind of points to another thing about Radio Silence. Like I said in the episode, like, I don't think Radio Silence had the sensibilities to be leaders of the franchise. This is a perfect example. Like, they overpromised Mark Kincaid to us. And not only could they not deliver that, one, but they're not even around to even try to deliver that to us.
Because I feel like when we, heard that Patrick Dempsey wasn't coming back for whatever reason, it was very disappointing to me. I know a lot of people don't necessarily like Mark and Sidney as a couple. I do. I've always liked it. Not because, two hot people, but because they seem to be, between those two actors in that one scene, such a connection and such a promise of what could be on the other side of her life. It's what I love about that relationship, and the fact that it could feel safe, for her in a lot of ways. And it could be something that, she can actually be vulnerable in because he understands, to some degree what she's going through. So, yeah, I completely agree with the Radio Silence anger because, yeah, you're right. They promised it. They put it out there in the ether, even though they didn't need to. It was very unnecessary. And now you have a bunch of people disappointed, And I think it kind of has a little bit of a dark effect on this movie a little bit because, like, if you only watch 5, and now you're coming to watch 7, you're like, who the fuck is Joel McHale? What is going on with him?
Well, And here's the thing about it, like, Scream 7, I think there's a lot of bad faith criticism of Scream 7. I hate to admit it, but it is completely fair to say, oh, well, this movie, you were supposed to have Patrick Dempsey and you don't. And like whether this new Mark works, let's just say that seeing it play out, seeing their marriage, seeing how they connect, if it makes sense for this Mark to be his own thing without, without living in the shadow of Mark Kincaid, that will be great, But that I would say this is a huge vulnerability of Scream 7.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly because one thing about the earlier Scream films is that they were such high drama, right? Very of the 90s. And it has a particular tone and feel, all to its own from, separate from any other horror movie. And I feel like you kind of need an actor that we have to take it back there. Hopefully Kevin Williamson will bring it back there because but I'm again, like, this might be very unfair. Like, I don't know how Joel McHale is as an actor, but like, how are we going to bring it there? And how is it going to be unique this time around? Because his uniform looks like it's another, yet again, security. And it's like, so what? We just like reskinned Mark Kincaid and called him something else,
Yeah, and I mean, I'm hoping for the best. I don't think that Neve would want this to be sloppy. I think that, I get the sense that Neve would want Sidney's family to be ironclad. Like, this is 7 movies in, and we're seeing Sidney's daughter, her offspring, her husband, a permanent thing for the first time. Like, this isn't like, we can't just like kill them off and like, it's a new daughter next time. Like, no, so this is really important. So I think that I trust Neve, and I think that if it was filmed, I think that it was done. I think that it was done with a thumbs up, like they believed in it, but it's still a vulnerability looking from the outside in objectively. So, I don't know. I mean, like, I think it would have been truly special to have Mark Kincaid back, but, I think we can be open-minded, but still it is disappointing because that scene in Scream 3 is so deep. It's so personal. And there's that chemistry that's already built in be fulfilled. But
if Joel McHale bites and is successful enough, maybe Patrick will come back and, they can rekindle that little romance for like, I don't know, 8 or 9. Who knows?
Exactly. For me, the biggest fear I have about Scream 7 relates to the Ghostface of it all. And I worry that the only thing that made the ghost faces of Wes Craven's films work was the Wes Craven touch. I'm afraid now, like in the modern era, what if even Kevin Williamson can't? Like, if let's just say the killers in Scream 7 turn out to be pretty weak. Let's just say they're like Amber and Richie, maybe a little bit better than them. I will feel so disappointed because this is our shot. If Kevin Williamson can't do a great Scream killer, a really awesome, like the way that we talk about Roman and Jill and Billy and Mrs. Loomis and Stu and Mickey, like, the way that how they functioned in the movies, how deep they were, that personal connection that with Sidney, the greatness of the actors. There's something, if Kevin Williamson can't recreate that, who can? In this world. And I feel like a part of me is just afraid, like, what if like the studios have allowed, movies like Hard Eyes and Scream 6 and this kind of very shallow, jokey form of a killer to be the standard. And that's what, Scream 7 is going to be, because this is the culture that it's a part of. This is the time that it's in, and this is what everything else is like. So what if Scream 7 is just another version of that? Like, that severely worries me because, like, for me, I don't understand really why people like Scream 6 so much. Like, I really, really don't, in terms of, like, it's, for me, if you look at the original films, it's not just the cool, so actiony set pieces. It's about the way that the story arcs and Sidney's connection with the killer. The killer's identity is so important to those first 4 movies. And to not have that in Scream 6, to have, like, I saw a meme today that says, like, Detective Bailey is like, the writers copied Scream 2's homework in a really cheap way. And that's what it feels like. It feels like they copied someone else's homework. And it's just like, it doesn't emotionally pay off for Sam. Like, the connection between Sam and the Bailey family, meh. The acting of the Bailey family, meh. Them as killers and how they operate within the finale, very meh. Like, nothing about it is good or quality. Like, and I think it's even worse than that. Like, Scream 6's killers, it's not even like with 5 and 6 with Mikey Madison and Jack Quaid. I think that like they kind of skate by in terms of being average because of the greatness of Courtney Cox and Neve and Melissa Barrera in that finale. I think that we kind of forget that they're just very average killers versus Scream 6, where those killers are offensive. And I think that like it's great that the Scream 5 finale emphasized how cool Gail Weathers is and how interesting Sam was at that moment. But in my opinion, it is not the same as Scream 1, 2, 3, and 4. Like that interaction between Sidney and Roman. I was just happened to have the Scream 3 finale on over the weekend. Neve and Scott, it is so intense. It's so intimate. Emma and Neve, it's so intimate, so intense. That I worry that we will never have that again. And we will always be stuck with these jokey, cartoonish killers that don't really matter to the story in a real way. That don't matter to Sidney. That don't change Sidney. That, you know, what it could have been anybody under the mask and their motive is just goofy. Like, I don't know. Do you hear what I'm saying?
No, yeah, I completely agree. This is what I've been saying from the very beginning. And even though I don't dislike 5 as much as I dislike 6, I think that 5 is really elevated because it's trying to be Scream 1 finale again. And so you have a lot of moving parts, and that kind of elevates these killers if you think about it. Because, I mean, what makes that enjoyable is how they get wrecked, right? Like, especially, like, you know, whether it's Amber getting set on fire or Amber getting beat by a fucking crutch, like, all those things are hilarious and funny. And then 6 is giving nothing. It's just copying Scream 2's homework and just actors just all over the place. It's just too much. I would say that for me, the finale always falls apart the moment they reveal themselves, which is awful. That's when things are supposed to get going. So as far as what you're saying, am I concerned about the killer? I think so, because I wish it's the same. It's how I feel about another issue. There's a gap here. Right? We haven't been with Sidney for such a long time, so there hasn't been enough time to sort of set something up appropriately. And I think people, you know, get fatigued with the whole, like, somebody from your past, you know, like miraculously you can always put someone there. So I almost hope that this movie is building something deeper, that even if this Ghostface is on the sucky or average side, I'm hoping that there's enough groundwork laid for a better Ghostface, or for there to be a to be continued or something. I don't know. But yeah, it is a big concern of mine. I'm not a good writer, so.
But it goes even deeper than just, say, the Ghostface. Like it's the performance of the actor. Can they find the humanity that Scott Foley did and that Billy Loomis had? Like, you know, so there's like the acting performance, there's the writing of the character, like who the character is, their personality, you know, and like a bigger thing too is like the motive. I am worried about the motive. I think that, like, I don't know, a part of me, like, I think that Scream 5 set a very dangerous precedent. And I think, like, it's so disappointing to think about Scream 5 in retrospect in the way that everyone kind of praised it for being about toxic fandom. Because while that is a worthy kind of idea to probe, that's all that there is. Like, there is, you know, I get that people like Mikey Madison. I get that people think that she's pretty. I get that people loved her performance in Anora and that she won Best Actress and beat who I think should have won, Demi Moore or Cynthia Erivo. But regardless, like, I don't know what the fascination is with Amber. I don't get it. I don't think who is Amber underneath all of that? Like, you know, Mikey Madison makes a cute eat, and everyone goes bananas. But like, who is Amber? Why is she doing this? We never get answered those questions. She's as flat as they come. Even like the killers in Scream 6. You can get them a little bit more, even if they're performed worse and executed worse. Amber, you know, again, it's very milquetoast. It's average. She passes by without offending us, but there's nothing to her. What about her do people like? Because there's only so much that cute line deliveries can get you, especially when you're the secondary killer.
Yeah, girl, you're preaching to the choir. Because, no, for real, because from the very beginning, I've probably been like the only voice, because I was the only one like milk toast on Scream 5. You know, like I said, I was coping heavily by saying 5 out of 10. In my personal opinion, right? But for me, that once I heard the motive, I was like, oh, here we go. Writers creating a permission structure so they can like do whatever. And then if you don't like it, then you're a toxic fan.
Yeah.
Whatever makes it into the movie is intentional, right? It's and I don't like it when I can tell that the writer's on their soapbox. I truly don't. And to me, that was just a built-in excuse, and that's why I hated it. I never thought it was worthy of being in Scream. It has nothing to do with Scream or the horror genre. It was something surrounding Star Wars. Why is this here? where this is not Scary Movie. This is Scream. Scream is a satire of, horror, true crime, society, whatever, but not a fantasy or sci-fi film. Like, what the fuck? So that was off for me. And when it comes to Amber, never got her either. Bless her heart, Mikey Madison. She might be a good actress. I'll never know. She's not a draw for me. I don't care what anyone thinks about that. I thought her performance was atrocious and it was weak. Like she was doing too much. She was doing too much. And I think the only reason she gives is she was radicalized on a subreddit. And if that's the backstory, then that's like, really? That's like worse than Stu. At least Stu had like in-person peer pressure. She was peer pressured virtually.
And I guess like the difference between Stu and Amber, because like that's what I think that they were trying to, like, it's so, Scream 5 is so lame, right? Radio Silence was trying so hard to make Jack Quaid the next Skeet Ulrich. Like they were trying so hard. But in order to be Skeet Ulrich, you have to be scary. And Jack Quaid is 0 on a scale of scariness.
He's
like,
giving incel. He's giving
yes.
incel.
There's nothing like, Billy Loomis is terrifying. Like he is really, really scary, both in the way that Skeet plays him and the way that Wes directs. It is a scary character. You are frightened of him. Has anyone ever been frightened of Richie Kirsch? The millions and millions of people who have seen Scream 5, is there anything about Richie that is even somewhat scary? I say absolutely not. And so they were trying to make Richie Billy and Amber Stu. And I was watching the Scream 1 finale recently too, and there is so much depth to Stu. We learn so much about his personality and the way that he thinks, and even whenever he does jokey type things, a camp, I guess you would say, it's still deep and it still makes sense within the world of the character. And I can't say the same about Mikey Madison's character in the way that it's written. There's just nothing to her. And I'm afraid, like, what if we get this amazing Sidney character, development for the first 3/4 of the movie, and then we get a killer like Amber, where there is no real motive, or, let's just up the ante. Let's say we get a killer where it is something kind of meta, but not meta in a really smart way, not in a profound way, meta in like the toxic fan way. Like instead of it being something truly deep and personal within their heart that makes them carry out this against Sidney.
No, I agree. It's tough because we've only had Radio Silence's like POV of what Scream is. And I personally feel like they have no idea what Scream is. Thankfully, we do have Kevin Williamson and we have Neve Campbell here to sort of, guide it in a way and also write it. Because for me, when it comes to, like you say, that Skeet Ulrich was actually scary. Yeah, he was, because he was like, he's scary in the same way that if anyone ever watched Jessica Jones, Kilgrave is scary, because he represents this sort of like white male, like good looking sort of like danger. Not to like, what I'm trying to say is I'm trying to make it about society in a sense of like, these people hold power and can sometimes hold power with their privileges, being pretty privileged, being of means of, finances. He had a cell phone, etc. So many people comment on this being like some sort of like precursor to Columbine in a way. So not that it influenced it, but that it almost like predicted the future, that this would be like some sort of suburban nightmare that happens again and again and again, aggrieved, angry, white, privileged men, right? Terrorizing. And I guess in media starts with Billy and Stu, or if you want to go really bad, back Rope with Hitchcock or something, right?
Wow, look at that reference.
Right. But for me, like you're right, like Jack Quaid, he doesn't have that same equivalency. And that's why I say I call him an incel. And maybe that's what they were going for, because they even undermined him and kneecap him in 6, like when they allow not only his father to act pathetic, but like when Sam like says he allowed, I guess, Amber to do most of the killing, and then his dad has this very pathetic reaction. It's like, I guess, like, but like, how are we supposed to? I'm not saying that you're not supposed to undermine the killer, but like that killer already didn't work. He was already so pathetic. It's like you're kind of taking away all the teeth from Richie. There's a balance, like there's Randy saying, Billy was a mama's boy, but I think there's a difference when you just make his whole family pathetic. They're all psychotic. They're giving bad performances. He's in the background. They're playing his fucking like childhood videos. Like, it's just like, it's giving like infantilized, And it's just like you're further infantilizing him when he's already, in my opinion, came off giving incel. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Like, I just think that character, by their own doing, just doesn't work in 5, and it becomes worse in 6.
Well, And like, if you think about the killers, like there's something, if you take Amber and Richie and then you take the 3 killers from Scream 6, and let's just expand it even more. Let's just throw in Hard Eyes. So, what's her name? Jordana Brewster. Spoiler alert, she's the killer in Hard Eyes. I feel like they're all the same person. All 6 of those people. You have Jack Quaid, Mikey Madison, Dermot Mulroney, Leanna Liberato.
Throw in Stevie. Stevie from I Know.
Fuck yeah.
Same bitch. They're all the same bitch.
They're all the same person. Like, what separates them in their personalities? What's different about them? How do they act any differently from each other in in their respective finales? And I think the answer is no. But even just look at like Wes Craven's like killers in the first 4 movies of Scream. They all couldn't be more different. Even like take Billy versus Stu, wildly different. Mrs. Loomis and Mickey, wildly different. Roman versus Jill versus Charlie, wildly different. All 3 of them. Yet all of these killers of recent movies have the same kind of personality, and it's like this weird cartoon like caricature thing that they do. It's very thin in terms of like the acting range, and I guess we blame the writing, but my fear is that Scream 7 can't break out of that, and that we get Stevie, and I know she did last summer, as opposed to getting something interesting and thriving and like imaginative. And I think that like that's the difference with Wes Craven's 4 Scream movies. All of those ghost faces were imaginative. And now, do I think can we have a good Scream 7 if Sidney is executed flawlessly and Tatum is flawless and the movie is well directed, well paced, has a great tone, everything we want, but the killer is, let's just say, Jack Quaid, Mikey Madison, milquetoast, like not like offensive, but that, do I think the movie would be fine? I think it would be okay, but it would make me really sad. It would make me feel like I would kind of just start to shrug thinking, oh, wow, so we're just never going to get a real Scream movie again. Thoughts?
I wouldn't say again, because I think, like I said, 7 presents the opportunity to build a framework in which other suspects can now exist, right? As we establish Sidney's world. And I feel like for 7, like let's say, I think the biggest decision point that's going to determine how good this is like, who is the killer and who are they connected to? And if you're going to bridge the gap between Sidney and Tatum, how are you going to do that? Because I could see like a teacher, guidance counselor, someone from Woodsboro that, like followed Sidney to Pine Grove or something, because then they may have a relationship with Tatum in some way. Right. But I would like them to not split the difference, because I think that you kind of have to, focus in on Sidney, because it's harder to split the difference, A. And B, I would like to at least see if we can get it, like you said, something that's emotional between Sidney and the killer. Because you're right, like those older films, they feel intense. I feel like, even with 4, right, 10 years later, that confrontation with Jill feels so intense.
Yeah.
Because it's like such a portrayal, but on top of that, it's like when you rewatch it nowadays, it's like, oh my God, like there are people like this. They're crazy.
Do you feel like, I mean, here's the thing about Jill too, like, because there are some people who will say that Emma Roberts kind of became her own thing, right? Because the performance she gives as Jill is kind of now the performance she gives in every single movie or TV show or miniseries that she ever does, which is fine. Jill is the OG and she's brilliant, but like, so maybe Jill was like the template for that decade, right? Of like kind of the tone of like, villainous characters. But like, Jill in Scream 4 is so different from the killers in the original trilogy. She's completely individualistic. There's only one Jill Roberts, and the commitment works, to what she's doing. And the Scream 4 finale is different. And I think that like, to get a finale that feels like we've seen it a million times, that would be a concern of mine too. I want it to feel like all of Wes's finales have something special about them. Scream 1's finale, I would argue, like the special thing about it is just, it was of course the first time we see 2 killers, and like the idea of 2 kids stabbing each other, that, and like the weird spatial thing. Scream 2, you have that big stage and everything's falling down. Scream 3, you have like the really bloodiest fight. And then Scream 4, you have Jill doing her self-mutilation scene. They're so varied. The settings are different. The tone is different. The action is different. And I just kind of worry, like, what if 7 is kind of a repetition of, the Scream 1 finale? What if it's in another kitchen?
I don't really worry about that so much, because it's not just the fact that you have to think about like 5 and 6. We're going back to similar locations and having similar things happen, right? And when I say that, I mean they're direct copy and paste aspects of prior movies, right? So Scream 1, we're back in Stu's house, quite literally, finale in the kitchen again, 6, oh, it was a theater in 2, so now we're gonna have a Mrs. Loomis moment, but worse, etc. You know what I mean? I feel like it's a domestic type of horror, so you're always gonna have similar locations. It's all about what's happening, the factors at play, what's at stake. All these things can feel unique in and of itself if, you're being creative about it. I mean, when I watched the trailer, it felt like a breath of fresh air, because typically these movies nowadays that are doing the requel thing or the legacy thing, it's just a bunch of shit you've already seen before, and I'm very tired of it. And to speak to Jill, why does she feel so distinct? It's because Wes directs Emma Roberts and allows Emma Roberts to act as if she's in on the joke.
Yeah.
Right? She almost has ownership
Yes.
of the film, right? Because she's competing to be the main character. And that's what feels so unique about Jill, what makes her so special, right? Because she gets to quip. She gets to quip like she's and it's little things like that, little details like that are really subtle, but it's up to the director, it's up to the writing, it's up to the performance. So we might see something very new. I mean, who knows? I would hope so. And I think I have a lot of trust in Kevin to give us somebody that at least is a new character.
Yeah.
Well,
and here's the thing too. Something that doesn't truly work about Scream 5 is the idea that like Sam is kind of the main character. Tara is MIA. She's in the hospital, right? And it's her friend group. And it's like one of her friends gets revealed as the killer. And I know that like Richie is revealed too. But like, I wonder how much balance the teens versus the adults. Like, so for instance, here's something that I'm worried about. I don't think this is going to happen. But I think that like having 2 or 3 killers or be all young teenagers, like both picked from Tatum's friend group, yet it's them and Sidney in the finale, and Tatum's not really like, she's kind of like, tied up somewhere. I think that would not work. I think you need to have adults here. I think you at least have one adult. I would prefer, either a solo adult killer or multiple adult killers as opposed to 2 teens or a teen and an adult. What are your thoughts there?
No, I agree. And I think this is why there's a genius behind Neve having a cafe, because that's a hangout for both adults and children. Right? So it's an easy way to explain why all these people of different ages are at the same place, why they would go to this place, in peril and stuff like that. It's like Kevin's TV writing coming through, because it's very Gilmore Girls or, a lot of other shows, like let's say Impulse, like these shows kind of split the difference very well, where it doesn't even feel like you're watching a quote teen show. So I think that Kevin does have in him to do that fairly easily, because for me it was also an issue. But I think that we can see we have different age groups here, right? We have high school, we have young adult with the twins, and we have adults and parents and stuff like that. I would expect that if we do see Tatum and her friends, she's at the cafe, she's at home.
That's a great point. Everything that we're saying in this episode is not necessarily that it's going to come true. It's probably not going to come true. We're hoping that it's not, but we're just kind of pointing out the guardrails of what could work versus what we know probably won't work, So, one thing that is a huge, easy thing that I'm kind of afraid of is the Gale of hell. So, I mean, in my opinion, this is make or break for Gale. Gale has always been the most, Sidney, I think, has been the deepest character, but Gale has been the character with the most variety. We've seen so many different shades of Gale, and that was her beauty and her strength over the first 5 films. Whereas with Sidney, it was the same person, just deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, right? So my fear with Gale is that they have just kind of, that we're going to abandon showing the evolved version of Gale, and she's just going to show up to be the reporter. She's going to be a bitch. She's going to have a sassy moment, and that's going to be it. As opposed to giving Gale a real story and a real purpose and evolved version of her that we are used to. You know what I mean? I think that if they don't get Gale right here, I think that we're kind of, Gale Weathers as we know her is over, I think it will still be fun to see her in the movies if she survives. But, that Gale that so many people on this podcast come onto this podcast and rave and gush about Gale Weathers. I think that if they don't get her back on track here, she's just going to be kind of, a very stagnant I say it all the time, stock character, kind of like like on a sitcom, like the Gunther in Friends. Like that's who she will become. She's just going to be, she's there for historical reasons. She's there because she has a specific job and she doesn't really change that much. She'll be Gunther. And I don't want her to be Gunther. I want her to be a thriving part of this franchise that is irreplaceable in how she was in the first 5 films.
With Gail, I have that concern as well, because you're right. We kind of have to get her back on track because, to be honest with you, even though Sidney is my favorite character, Gail is right up there with her.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that every time we meet her, she's different. And she has like some of the best character arcs and change in any horror movie ever, any horror franchise there is. And it's such a wonderful contrast to see how, Gail herself sort of like deals with and confronts with these things, and like in contrast to Sidney. Right. And for me, one of the biggest concerns I have about that, because this is what I was talking about before with the gap. Right. We didn't get even in 5, we didn't properly mourn or process Dewey. So we have 2 movies of weight that was never processed. And so I'm worried about how that's going to be done. But for me personally, I feel that this is why I feel like Dewey has to be like implicitly omnipresent, because that's the only way to do it. Because we didn't have a big moment. We didn't have, big grief from Sidney or anything like that. You have to feel his loss almost constantly.
Yeah.
And like sort of bring some stakes from that. You know what I mean? That they're doing this, that this threat feels more real because they lost one of theirs, something like that.
Do you think like, this is a real fear too. What if Matthew Lillard, Scott Foley, and David Arquette's announcements, that they were just cynical PR traps and they don't actually serve the movie in any real way other than like, ooh, look at this shiny object, and they're going to be used in kind of like very shallow ways, as opposed to like what you're describing, like as a reckoning for Sidney and Gail as they proceed on their journey, as opposed to just like, the fear would be that they just kind of pop in a very shallow way and that they don't actually mean anything. It's more fan service than it is something meaningful.
Well, what if they Halloween kills this? Basically is what you're asking. Well, I would hope not. And I think I know why, because the studio was very, very big on discrediting, not really discrediting, but like minimizing the OG, So it's especially like the Scott Foley of it all. Like that's like Stu. Yeah, they love to rip off Stu, but Scott Foley,
Yeah.
Like I think it's still mainstream understanding that people still like to shit on 3. Even though things have changed, I'm sure that the studio would probably think, oh yeah, that's the maligned sequel.
Right.
I'm sure they still think that. So that's the Scott Foley of it all makes me feel like there might be something deeper.
Yeah.
It feels like a deeper cut, like something that Kevin or Neve are working on.
So, on that note, are you afraid of the inclusion of Chad and Mindy? Because this was something that was kind of also talked about, was like, how do they actually realistically fit in here? I think like, one of my pet peeves with Guy Busick is like, he has this thing where he has, instead of just letting the characters be themselves, the returning surviving characters, he forces a job on them. Gail has to be the reporter in the field. Kirby has to be the FBI agent. And now we have Chad and Mindy, who are going to be working for Gail as, I guess, the producer and the cameraman, as opposed to just like saying, like Chad and Mindy saying, oh, hey, I went through this. I care about these people and I want to help, like that's, so I don't know. Are you afraid of how Chad and Mindy are going to be tacked on, or are they going to be actually relevant and we're going to think they were used well and I'm glad that they were here?
Yeah. And you're right about that. That observation is very astute, because that's the easy way to write a character, use them as a tool, right? Kirby's not here because she cares or she has any other like characteristics or an arc, actually. She's here because she's an FBI agent. And that way I can satisfy fans by having this particular character. And I think they were very heavy on the whole, no one would like actually go back to Woodsboro or whatever, they would say that a lot. And it's just like, well, people are also human.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, very good reason, sure. But like, also it's like, what the fuck? Like, I care about these people. That's sometime enough, like people do risk more for less a lot of the time, So for me, as far as the twins go, them working with Gail, I feel like, am I glad they're here? No, because I feel like they're taking up time from Sidney and Gail. Do I see a world where this is satisfying? Yeah, I do. And I'll tell you why. Because this opens up us to really this gives Gail somebody else other than Sidney to confide in, and opens up that space for her to like, occupy another like, main character space. Kind of like how she always confided in her cameraman. Like she kind of lost that in 4 and 5 and 6. You know what I mean? Like, and we lost that personal connection to Gail. So if you could fulfill it with one of the twins, great. I don't know which one it will be, but I do think that it'll also bring some stakes to her too. Maybe they can write something around, the twins getting attacked or losing one of like, Randy's nieces or nephews is like this sort of breaking point for her or something, because if you think about it, this is kind of dramatically good because that phone call for Randy was meant for Gail.
Yeah. Ooh. Wow. Look at you. Wow.
Yeah.
That's true. Oh my goodness. So I love what you said. And like, to be honest, I think that it's kind of like the Mark thing. I think there is actually some credibility here because the Meeks never even talked to Sidney. They've never been in the same frame as Neve Campbell. So why would they be in a Sidney story? I get that there's some skepticism. I think it can be overcome though because of what you just said. And like, even though they've barely been in the same frame as Courtney Cox, technically they were. Like, there's a couple of shots of them in the shrine together, whatever. But we've never actually seen them talk to Gail Weathers. I think what you just said about the cameraman is perfect, and it's actually a really smart thing to do because like there's no introduction we need to the cameraman. We have history with them. We know them. We love them. And because there is a shared history within the characters off screen, it will make for rich moments. Even if their dynamic is just comedy, I think that the twins with Gail is going to be very entertaining to watch. And I think fans will really enjoy it in like a Gail and Jennifer type of a way.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, I feel like Courtney Cox is so great at comedy. I'm just hoping that we reach the heights of like Gail of Kenny in terms of comedy. But like, yeah, I think that this is, to me, it's a smart move. Maybe it's one too many, I don't know, but maybe one of them can die. And also, like I said, I think that this opens up to have Gail, like, maybe we could see her investigation because she has 2 people with her, stupid, to be walking around with just one person. And even when she, like you said, with Parker Posey, running around like the Scooby-Doo gang. So I do see this as a very good opportunity to not just like understand more about Gail and where she is, but give her a little more agency so we can actually see her work again because we just haven't in such a long time.
Well, so you brought up this, and this is something that we've talked about ad nauseum, right? We did a whole episode on this as a group a couple of months ago. Scream 6 had 6 survivors going into the movie from 4 and 5 to 6, and we left with 6 out of 6 plus 1 in Danny surviving, and 8 if you count Frankie, the date rape Frankie. Are we concerned about the death count? Are we concerned about it's like, Scream, we don't talk about this enough. Like Scream 2 and 3 and 4, Wes went really heavy with the kills. Like there was rarely anybody was spared. Once in a while you'll get like the weird fifth of, 4th or 5th survivor, like in Joel, for instance, in like Scream 2. But really, it was always like, it happened to be the trio, and plus 1, right? Otherwise, everybody else fucking died. And it's just like, do we think that Kevin in Scream 7 is going to follow, the trajectory of Wes Craven where everybody goes except for, maybe a couple people? Or are they going to follow 5 and 6, which is like, oh, a bunch of people survive too? And is it a problem with whichever one is picked?
I think the biggest problem would be if there are no stakes at all. This is supposed to be a horror movie. And even though the appeal of Scream is catching up with Sidney and the gang, it's still small enough where it feels like there could, that there's real stakes surrounding a film, So for me, I've always felt like this whole having everyone survive thing, it just doesn't make any sense. This is not a CW show. Like, what are we doing? But also, when it comes to the other side of it, do I think that we might go back to a new trio? We might. It might just be Chad, Gail, and Sidney, or Tatum, Sidney, and Gail, or Chad, or, the 4 of them in some type of way, shape, or form. And I think that if we're leading into several more movies, because I think Scream 8 got greenlit. Did it get greenlit?
It's rumored to have, but it hasn't come from Deadline. Let's just say it that way.
Okay. So for me, I think I would prefer one of the twins, probably Chad, Sydney's daughter, and Sidney and Gail. right, to survive. And I think that you can kill Chad later, maybe in 8, because I think I like the idea of having someone, a confidant for Gale. I think Chad is the better person to fit that, so we can actually see where she is emotionally. And like Chad seems like a character that takes care without having to be told. So he can pick up on things and we can learn so much about Gale and where she is in her recovery, in general from him. And I also feel like it would be nice for Randy's legacy, even if he does end up surviving, right, to see him succeed in some sort of broadcasting sort of career where Randy couldn't, right, because he wanted to be a film student. So that might be a nice little bookend for that legacy if Chad just, survives the whole way through.
So I have two more questions, definitely, I want to ask you. One is about, and I don't need to harp on this because I think that the trailer is evidence enough, but a concern that people had, and I don't really find it so legitimate, is because, okay, well, the concern is that Kevin Williamson being the director of Scream 7. He has only directed one movie, and that was in 1999, a long time ago, and it wasn't well received. People have held this against him, and why he is a bad choice to direct Scream 7, and that it will not be a good movie because of this. Personally, I think that using Teaching Mrs. Tingle as your only source of evidence from 30 years ago, I think that is lame as shit, and you're really stupid for doing that. And that, first of all, that's a long time ago. A lot of people who will be seeing Scream 7 weren't even born then. And being a director is so much more than what you can probably imagine. And I think a lot of it is learning the industry and knowing the industry. And I think Kevin has that in spades. And he's a creative. So I don't know. I don't see this as a problem. And I think with the trailer, the way that things are choreographed and shot, and the way the trailer looks and the emotions, I think that there's no issue to think that this is going to be a badly directed movie, or that using Teaching Mrs. Tingle as evidence that Kevin will suck as a director in 2026. I think that's just completely absurd. Jess?
Yeah, I think it's kind of unfair. I mean, concerns when you don't have that much directing experience is always kind of valid. But as someone like Kevin Williamson, who's been around, right, and he was actually on set a lot for Scream, and and it's, for me, I'm like, okay, first of all, you can have choreography. Right? You have your cinematographer. It's not just him. What's important is, I feel, the most important thing about a director, besides the eye and the vision, which once again can just come from the cinematographer, it's the working with the actor, right? So I feel like that's invaluable. So it's okay for him to be in this position because I feel like everything else can be made up for. And he certainly has connections, I would imagine. And again, all these things you can work through. I understand that some people might be concerned because for some reason, back in the day, he used to say oh, I wrote this, but Wes will make it scary. So he relied a lot on Wes Craven's imagination to bring something to life. But I'm he's a horror fan. He can do some research. He can watch some movies. He can even watch Wes's work, right? And I think what's probably a little bit more probably more challenging for him would be the consistency that
Yeah.
Wes brought to each of these movies. Because with Wes Craven, all the clues mattered.
Yeah.
You can watch these movies again and it felt cohesive. It felt right. It felt satisfying. I think that's his biggest challenge, not necessarily the direction part, because I don't really care about that as long as what I'm getting feels emotionally resonant. It's like the H2O of it all, once again.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And what you said about working with the actors, there's so much of directing that is just getting the actors all on the same page and the same tone and the same emotions. And I think that is literally, I think Kevin Williamson is doing that in his sleep. So I'm not worried about that at all. So another point that I want to discuss with you is, are we concerned about the way that Sam and Tara will be discussed in terms of will they be specifically described what they're doing to minimally, or or even so, let's just say, or are they talked about so often? Are they talked about not enough? What if they're not mentioned at all? And how do we feel about that? There's no right or wrong answer. I think I could ask literally every single person in the Patreon, every single person who listens to the podcast, and I would get a different answer from everybody. So what are your thoughts, Jess?
Well, I don't care. It's just as plain as that. I don't care. I'm not the worst person to ask that question because I'm and I think the thing about it is when Scream 6 came about and the idea of how will they address the Sidney of it all, I always felt like that was a bigger gap to fill than Sam and Tara, because Sam and Tara literally just got here. Ghostface is usually a character that comes after Sidney Prescott. You know what I mean? Like Sidney has a vested interest in stopping a Ghostface because of all her history. Like, there's all these reasons why, and like why Six felt so wrong with the shrine. Like, a shrine for you? Who are you? You know, it just didn't make sense. So when it comes to Sam and Tara, I do feel like, do you have to mention them? I'm sure that Chad will, you know, because he had that little thing with Tara. But I don't think you really necessarily need to. I mean, they're off doing their own thing, you know, and, you know, that's fine. I just don't understand why people feel like they have such a stake in this franchise. Like, it's just 2 movies. Like,
Yeah.
they don't define what Scream is.
I mentioned this on my episode today, and I talked about like this idea of like people who try to like make the core 4 be weighted the same way as the trio, or to act as though, you know, if we talk about Sidney and Gale and Dewey in this certain way, we must be equivalent and give core 4 that same equal consideration. And I just don't think it's the same. Again, like it's hard for us to see it right now because we're in the middle of it. But what I said on this episode today was that, like, imagine like fans of Scout Taylor Compton, who was Laurie Strode in the remakes of Halloween, or fans of Danielle Harris, who was the main character of Halloween's 4 and 5. Imagine being forced to act as though Danielle Harris or Scout Taylor Compton is equal to Jamie Lee Curtis. And then I think you see how ridiculous it is, right? Because Jamie Lee Curtis has 7 Halloween movies. That's the same as Courtney Cox. Neve Campbell is right behind her with 6. And Scout and Danielle each had 2. So it's not the same. And like, you know, I have to say...
Well, Danielle had 4. She was in the remake too. She's Annie.
Oh, duh.
It's not enough, you know. Just to be fair to Danielle.
Yeah. But in terms of being the lead, I should say. But yeah, you know, you're right. See, that's a little like the Rob Zombie movies, but like, you know, so thank you for the fact check. But the point is, like, let's just say Scott Taylor Compton, right? You know, 2 movies. Like, is Scott Taylor Compton the same as Jamie Lee Curtis? My answer is no. And it's ridiculous to force this. I don't know.
Dude, when those movies came out, right, the zombie remakes, I was 16. Right. And I remember, damn, I got into that R-rated movie at 16. Yep, I went. Right. Or no, it came out in August. I would have already been 17. Oh, yeah. And the thing is that I remember being kind of lukewarm on it in the sense that I enjoyed the end. Right. I was like, okay, at least this is giving something. But I never thought to myself, even though I always liked Scout as Laurie to some degree, I liked her better as Laurie in the second one. I never thought to myself, oh, this is my Laurie Strode, or she's better, or she's eclipsed Jamie Lee Curtis. She owns the franchise now. I never felt that way. And I don't quite understand why, you know, newer fans are like this, that it has to be one or the other. Like, no, like Scout did her job, and, you know, it's, you know, whoever you ask is better in one or the other. And she loves the fandom and she engages, you know, and we love to have her here, but she's not Laurie Strode. Like, let's be honest, she's not Jamie Lee.
Well, and so like kind of going off of this point is like, I'm going to just make my prediction. I think people waiting for an explanation of Sam and Tara in Scream 7 and their absence are going to be severely disappointed. I think they're not going to be mentioned at all. I think it's going to be Chad and Mindy show up. They're working for Gale. No questions asked. You know, everything is implied. I don't even think that the romance needs to be explained. You know, I think that we are just going to sail by. I know that's going to hurt some people, and some people are going to be up in arms thinking, how could they not mention Sam and Tara? But like, to our point, like, they don't need to be mentioned. It's not Sidney. Like, Sidney was the main character for 15 years, you know, and she was in every movie up until that point. Again, that is uniquely different than being in 2 movies that were, you know, 13 months apart from each other in terms of their theatrical releases. It's just different. And like, I think that this is going to be a tough pill for some to swallow, but I think in 10 years when we look back, we'll be like, oh yeah, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it's going to be, you know, like for me, I feel like it's going to be reminiscent of Halloween, right? Where everyone was sort of attached to little Danielle, upset by Six bombed, but once Jamie Lee was back, everyone was like, oh my God, we're back, right? Like, we kind of forgot about little Danielle Harris, you know, and we just kind of moved on. And that's because, like, let's be honest, like, Halloween, you typically with these horror movies, we always are attached to the main character, the original main character, unless that original main character was like complete dog shit and a successor is better. Do I do I think that there's a good chance that they won't be mentioned. And I don't think that it will be a diss of any kind because it's like, I don't even know why we say Sam and Tara. Sam is the main character. Like, why does Tara have to be mentioned at all? And she's the only one that I can see a reason to mention in a lot of ways because apparently Chad was having a relationship with her. She's like the only one worthy of a mention, of an explanation, because Chad will be without her, right?
Yeah.
But even then, you don't have to explain that. So it's even sadder because like Sam is the main character, yet there's no real reason, like any necessity to explain her absence. She's not here. It's not about her. Once again, get out of here.
I think that like it would be a mistake. I think that if they get mentioned, I'm saying if they get mentioned, I hope that it's something subtle and it's something just like how they treated Neve in Scream 6. That, elusiveness, that should be how it's done. It was inappropriate with Neve. It's, but it would be appropriate with them. But I think to over-explain it, to be like, oh yeah, they moved to Europe and now they're in the witness protection program and like they have this secret job doing blah, blah, blah. Like that would be, girl. Like it's like making a Kirby the FBI agent. It's over-explaining. It's ridiculous. Stop.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that we should just gracefully move on. Just like, I mean, they're lucky too, because it's not like we're retconning here. They could have been completely erased. If it were up to me, I'm sorry, but I would have erased it. I'm sorry, I would have, because to me, you already like ruined it. You ruined like the quality of this franchise. So there's like, if I retcon to save it, then I'm gonna retcon to save it.
Okay.
So that's how I feel right now. I mean, I know a lot of people are like, oh, there's no bad Scream movies. I'm like, okay, bless your heart, but like for me, Scream 6 is a bad Scream movie fundamentally. And we just have to live with that. But hopefully the Phoenix Rising is going to be that much more gratifying, especially since, you're basically like laying out the story of this production in today's episode. And, I think that you did such a great job of that because, it does show that, Neve came in, she like saved the day and it means something to her. And it does mean something. One thing, this franchise means something. It's a staple in film history, not just horror history. So I feel that coming back and getting this done, I think that it can happen. And I don't think that we have to be apologetic about it. I mean, if they would have retconned, I would have been fine with it.
Well, so thank you for what you said about the episode today. In terms of Neve, so let's just, let's go back. The idea, like, so I feel as though, like, you've talked about this, how the way that the studio treated Neve, within Scream 5 and 6, and how she did kind of come back and save the day. And I feel like the act of doing it and like her not being there with Scream 6, I said it on the episode today. I don't know. I didn't get much pushback, so I assume people just accepted what I said. But I feel like it's almost like someone wrote this story like in a book, right? In terms of like you take away Neve Campbell and then you have Scream 6, which is like at this point I think most fans would agree it's the worst movie in the franchise. I know it did well with the box office and at the time people were into it, whatever. But I think that right now we can look back and be like, yeah, this was bad. So you have like a movie where the killers are a joke, right? You have a movie where Gail Weathers is really like there's character assassination. And then also after that, you have radio silence, bailing. You have Jenna Ortega thinking she's better than everybody else, bailing. You have the fallout of Melissa Barrera and the fallout of Christopher Landon and just like all of this drama and all of these really bad things happening. And isn't it just ironic that it's the one time where Neve Campbell isn't around, where, she's not there to be the anchor. I think that like, had she been able to be the leader, I don't think that things would have fallen apart so spectacularly. But regardless, I think that like Neve proved her power by not being there and then being able to come in and be like, let's clean this up.
It's a power move, right? Like,
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so you think you could do it without me? You think that my role is meaningless or could be easily replaced? I think that it worked out spectacularly for her. And I hope that this kind of plays into a future for her that even, if these movies do continue somewhat, like without her, some type of spinoff that she can like work her way to always producing them, Like, I don't want it to be like such a, like a conveyor belt of Scream stuff, because that's how we get bad quality. But if there is another Scream project, even if she's not part of it, like the Scream TV show, like if they want to do something like that again, okay, good for you. I would hope that they respect her enough to say, hey, can you help us produce this? Like, guide this secret sauce, please, because, like I said, like I feel like you laid it out in such a way that is like, for Jamie Lee, she was able to insert herself because she's Jamie Lee Curtis, right?
Right.
Hollywood royal. For Neve, like, I don't know, like, it's so gratifying because it really made me, this is why I didn't go see 6. I did not go see 6 because I don't go see Scream if Neve's not there, because it really disgusted me so much that, this character that means so much to so many people could be so easily, like, discarded. And then you think you're going to, like, do well with a franchise. It's like, not really. Because even if Scream 7 happened with Sam and Tara, I guarantee you it would have continued falling apart. It would have gotten worse and worse. So I'm happy for Neve to get her little redemption arc here, because I think this movie is going to be successful because I think that her and Kevin care.
Yeah.
And they care deeply. And, I try to explain to people that it's more than just, it's a movie, it's a paycheck. I think for them, it's legacy. I think it means the world to them. So, yeah.
Well, so just to like back up Jess's point, imagine a Scream 7. Okay, let's just pretend like, nothing, let's just pretend like it went off without a hitch. Okay, there was no studio drama, there was no exits. It was the Chris Landon film where he was directing a script by Guy Busey, starring Melissa Barrera. Jenna Ortega's not doing it, and it was a Christmas movie because that's the rumor that it would have been a Christmas movie. And let's just,
I heard it was supposed to be on a desert island or something. A deserted island, excuse me.
Okay, well, so either a deserted island or a Christmas movie, another gimmick, right? Like New York was a gimmick. So a gimmick, so Christopher Landon directing a Guy Busey script starring Melissa Barrera, no Jenna Ortega, and a gimmick of either Christmas or a desert, and potentially Sam going crazy and actually becoming Ghostface. That would have been the death of Scream. In a bigger way. We wouldn't be getting, let's just say, the plan was to come back to Sidney after the Sam trilogy. We wouldn't be getting that movie. We wouldn't.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Because, like, I think that while Scream 6 threw off a lot of people, because I remember, like, Scream 5, a lot of people were like, this is solid, a lot of critics. Scream 6, the critics weren't as, united in this is solid. A lot of them were like, this felt off the rails in the worst way. So, as you can see, like, the shine of Scream being back was starting to, go away, and people were like looking at this without their rose-colored glasses and being like, okay. So I feel like shifting it that way, I can see a lot of people would say, oh, this is something new, and those are the people who just don't understand Scream, whatever. And I can see a lot of people, it's like the people who say issue with Scream is that Ghostface always changes. Like, okay, well, we need to stop talking. This is not a serious conversation.
Yeah, you're not a relevant person to the discourse of Scream if that's what your position is. I've had it with people that you just described that say, oh my God, Scream 6 was so fresh. It was so different. It was so fun. It was so different. They captured the city life so well. It's just
I
what
live
the
in New
franchise
York.
needed.
I fucking live in New York. It did not capture anything. The only thing I can praise from that film is that they got the stops right going uptown or whatever on the train. But other than that, I was like, girl, next car. Why aren't you going to the next car?
And like, to your point, like, if you enjoy Scream 6, enjoy it. Like, I don't want to like yuck your yum, but but we are also allowed to have our opinions. Like Jess and I are allowed to, talk with confidence about our opinion. Oh, sorry. I can recognize that Scream 6 is competently made to an extent as a cinematic piece of whatever entertainment. But there is a difference between like the piece of the week at AMC versus a Scream movie and like the Scream formula and specific things that make a Scream movie Scream. And that's what Jess and I are talking about. And that's why I can come off as a dick about Scream 6 a lot of the times. And I don't mean to be mean, but it's just we're grading it as a Wes Craven film. We're grading it as a part of this franchise. We're not grading it as, the Marvel movie of the week.
Scream's the mystery is less important, and we don't have as much investigation, and the characters are more flat. And I truly believe, like, thinking about it, like, why do they have so many survivors? I believe because they don't know who the draw is. I think that that's what it is. They don't know who actually is the draw of the film, and they want to maximize profits.
And I feel like with Scream 7, it couldn't be clearer. Even from the trailer, the first trailer, where it is literally just Sidney and her daughter. And let's be real, it's mostly Sidney. And because Tatum, like, we don't even really hear Tatum talk. She only has, one line of dialogue? We see her a lot, but so it's mostly Sidney and Ghostface talking back and forth. So I think that, like, that identity crisis is not present here in Scream 7, which, for all of, like, everything that we just kind of went through, the mental exercise, again, it's not saying I don't think that I don't mean to speak for Jess, but I don't think that what we were doing here with this episode was saying, oh, this is going to happen in Scream 7 and it's impending doom. No, it's just more so like we have been through it. For 2 movies, since Scream has kind of returned, a lot of people have gone through it. Like with me, it was mostly Scream 6 and then everything that's happened after that. And it's just all of these hoops that we've jumped through and everything that we've lived through with it. It's like we know, we can sense where it could potentially go wrong. And we don't want it to go wrong. We want it to go right. So I know we talked a lot about the killer. I hope that, and I have faith that Kevin Williamson can do a better killer than Radio Silence can. Even if he doesn't make a Scream 1, 2, and 3 and 4 killer, I think he can do better than 5 and 6. Again, we were Jess and I were kind of putting the pedal to the metal here, judging and grading and kind of musing based off of a Scream criteria of grading.
Yeah, and honestly, this kind of shows that, we kind of have our scruples here because other people who just stand these films, right? You're talking about the concept of stands today too. Like, people are like, oh, you're just a Neve stan. Like, bitch, no, we're like, us millennials are beyond that side of crazy. But like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, but I would ask you, because I didn't get to ask anybody, do you agree with what I said? So basically on the episode today, I said, like, I don't really see, there are people like the Melissa people are like, use Neve stands won't erase Melissa's legacy. And it's like, I don't really, do Neve stands like truly exist? I think that if you're to be a Neve stand is to be a Scream fan.
I agree, completely agree. You would likely watch Scream or The Craft, and then you discovered Neve Campbell, and then you watched the other movie that year or the next year, and then you just became obsessed, right? And you watched maybe Party of Five or whatever the hell, and Wild Things, etc. But it's not like we're sitting here like Neve is, like on a pedestal. We love Sidney. We love Neve because she brings life to Sidney, right? And because she appreciates the fandom and because she is the history of Scream. It's not about erasing Sam. I understand they might feel that way because of like the circumstances of her firing or whatever, but like we're not doing that. We just want to watch a Scream movie. And regardless, Sam's legacy and its, I guess you could say its potency in relation to Sidney was always going to be like not enough because she would need like 4 or 5 movies, right? To outdo Sidney. She would need a generation of her own. And it was always something that was in the making. Unfortunately, for them, it's no longer going. But I don't understand why they feel so personal. It's like that's their whole personality. It's like, go watch Melissa Barrera's doing a show with fucking Shang-Chi. Go watch that fucking shit and leave us the fuck alone.
Well, and here's the thing about Melissa's legacy and I guess Jenna's legacy within Scream. Sam and Tara, they exist. Like, they aren't going anywhere. And me and Jess sitting here talking isn't going to erase them. And like talking about Neve and like her importance and like, the specific role she plays in Scream, that I described in depth on the how Neve Campbell became the leader today. None of that erases Melissa's legacy within Scream. It will speak. Melissa's legacy in Scream will speak for itself, and history will judge it for itself. So that is that's not up to me. That's up to the world and culture. But also, like, attacking Neve ridiculously and like being horrible to her and like trying to gaslight all the Scream fans into thinking that Sidney isn't as important as she is, like, that ain't it. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think this episode really points out that, we have standards. These weren't
Exactly.
these weren't like fucking magical, criticisms just for Sam and Tara. These are standards for any Scream movie, and they just fail to meet them. It's not that we hate them. It's not because they're of color. It's not any of that,
No,
right?
not at all.
It's quite literally that the people who conceptualize these characters were not putting in the work, not just in Sam or Tara, but in Chad or Mindy and Gail and the story and the mystery and the killers. The whole thing was just like half-assed. That's what it is. As a product, it's not good enough to our standards.
Is it crazy to you that Neve Campbell, from what we know, she hasn't seen Scream 6, but she said she didn't like the ending of Scream 5, that it felt off to her, the way that Radio Silence profiled Sam's violence and like this evil tendency and this question like, ooh, look, our main character may be evil, guys. Ooh, look at this. She may snap, and Neve didn't like that. She said that isn't Scream. And if you actually like listen to a lot of what Wes Craven said when he was making these movies, he talked a lot about good versus evil. And it's so interesting that Neve understands that language and remembers it from Wes and kind of recognized in Sam at the end of Scream 5. And again, I'm not saying that she's bad at the end of Scream 5. I actually kind of like the way that she kills Richie. I think that it's actually a strong moment of acting from Melissa. It's fun in the way that it's filmed. But you can't disrespect Neve Campbell's opinion that she felt like that wasn't really Scream. What are your thoughts on Neve's analysis there?
Right, because when I was hearing that in the audiobook, I was like, oh my God, I felt the same way for that finale, because that fucking monologue was way too long, way too long. It took complete feeling unconfident in what your motive is. Like, that's what it gives to me when you have to over explain like that. So when it comes to that moment, I think where I think that Neve probably thinks that it's losing people or losing what Scream is supposed to be is where they hover over Sam, and she has like this, she's like huffing and puffing, like, she's acting as if she wants to do more, wasn't enough. And then she hands, the gun and all this stuff. Because you can have her kill him like that and have her walk away. And I think that what we're talking about when it comes to Wes is like, think about why he wanted Nancy's ending to be what it was in the first one, to turn away. It wasn't more violence, but to take away the power that this, person has over you, right? Kind of like what you have to do in, normal everyday life, right? The answer typically isn't more violence, but it's being able to confront and go, right? Keep moving and letting go. And this concept of the final girl being, I guess you could say, above that, right? Above getting sucked into the cycle of violence, the cycle of abuse, all these things, but being able to shed herself of that violence and keep moving forward, untainted, right? So yeah, I would imagine that, to me, like that's the battle, right? Sidney has to battle each time in between movies to remain herself. I think that probably one of the most, like, not necessarily ominous, but like one of the stronger endings for Scream 2, when she hands off the media off the cotton, I always wonder with Neve, because she has like this look on her face. Like, it's not necessarily like, you saved me. It's almost like with a great sadness she does it. Because it's almost like she understands what's about to befall him.
Yeah.
The media eye, God, Neve's performance there is so great because it says so much. It's like, yeah, thanks, I'm doing what I said I was going to do, but like, now I understand what I'm handing towards you. I'm putting the target on your back now.
Yeah.
So even with that, like, that's like a complex ending. She's still, once again, walking away as she is. Damaged, yes, but she's still our hero.
Yeah.
Sam doesn't really manage to do that. She's girl bossing her way through, and nothing feels real with her, which is why I feel like you felt that Neve's performance never really comes through in 5, because they're not interested in it. They're not interested in emotional turmoil at all.
It's funny how much this episode today is being referenced as like the sequel. So in that episode, I talked about like, radio silence. When they, in filming Scream 5 in the finale, they did these really tight close-up shots, like even more tight than Wes Craven did, like really extreme. You're practically like in the nostrils of the actors. And a lot of people thought, oh, that's because the set sucks. The set looks like shit, and that's why they were trying to hide it as much as possible. Even with that, though, because like, and here's the other thing, is that Neve Campbell was known for her, like in the original trilogy in particular, she was known for her eye work, like expressing Sidney's emotions and her mental state through her eyes, through her facial expressions, and the nuance within that. And you would think that putting the camera, practically touching Neve's nose in the finale of Scream 5 would have been the recipe for like, oh, this would be a great thing to show who Sidney Prescott is again. We'll get the magic back of Sidney in the original trilogy. And it gets lost in translation. Like, Neve is speaking a different language than Radio Silence is. Like, Radio Silence in the style of like the filming and like how the story that they're telling and like the language that they're doing with their camera isn't matching the language that Neve is doing by portraying Sidney. Like, she's trying to serve, but their style won't let her serve for the audience in the same way that it did for the original trilogy.
Oh yeah, I think one of the biggest moments you can see it in is when she says, "Oh, Gail." And they fucking cut to fucking Courtney Cox. Why would you cut there? She's serving like this amazing look of compassion that's like loaded with all the weight of their history, and they fucking cut away way too soon. And I think that it is a bad editing, to be honest with you, and also bad on their part, because we know directors sit there with their editors and stuff like that, and not noticing and once again not being interested in the actual performance. Instead of all these aren't I suspicious looks, why aren't we interested in like the nuanced emotional like relationships between these characters? And I think in that ending, there's just so much going on, and Amber is so off, like off her rocker, that there's no room for Neve to literally, give an emotional performance. There's barely any room for it. The tone is all over the place as well.
You know where I noticed it? I know this is weird, but after Amber stabs Sidney, I feel like we don't even get to see her face. Like, compare like the way that Sidney is stabbed in Scream 5. Like, also, I hate to say this, but there are sometimes I forget that Sidney is stabbed in Scream 5. I feel I sometimes people have to remind me. I'm like, oh yeah, she did get stabbed in the stomach again. Versus Scream 4 when Jill stabs her twice.
Oh my God, so impactful.
That finale, even just like Nev standing there in the kitchen while Jill is doing her thing, killing Charlie, talking, blah, 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 shooting Trevor. The intensity of Nev in those moments, compare that to the way that like Radio Silence films Neve Campbell in Scream 5 after she's been stabbed. Like, they put the camera, like they're directing Nev to put her face down, but the camera isn't really capturing her eyes and her expression. It's just like, why?
I think it's because they only treat wounds like they're some sort of obstacle when it's convenient for them. I mean, we see how they they do it. They turn it on and off for Jenna in Scream 5. There she can barely move around in her wheelchair, or she can beat Amber's ass with a fucking cane. Well, her crutch, because I guess she was overcome by adrenaline or something. I don't know. But yeah, I completely agree with you, because like I watched Scream 4 midnight release. Right now, a whole bunch of people, Ghostface, like Scream 2, basically a Scream 2 situation when it came out. And I remember it was like a packed fucking theater for midnight. And I remember when Sidney runs towards that corner and Jill stabs her, it's like the whole fucking theater was quiet. This was serious. Like, you know what I mean? Like, Sidney was cornered and everybody was feeling that, They're doing too much. It's almost like they use wounds. Like I said, they use it as a tool, and they're not quite confident in how they want things to come about, how to make it happen, because all of it still doesn't make sense. Why drag Gail in there? Why not just kill her? Like, it's like, again, it's like everything feels forced because they want things to happen a particular way with particular players,
Well, also, the moment, and I think that, like, I'm not saying that Radio Silence is completely ineffective in terms of working with actors. Like, for instance, like, they do a great job with Samara Weaving in Ready or Not. I actually think that I think that, like, Courtney Cox, they do a great job with her in Scream 5. And in the finale, like, why are they so good at directing Courtney, but they aren't good at directing Nev? Like, there are some shots of Courtney in the finale. Like, for instance, like, there's a shot of Gail where she's, like, sitting up and she says, "Do you want to do the honors?" before she shoots Amber. And her hair, like, is straggly all over her face. Courtney looks sexy. Like, she looks like, it just, that to me feels like the exhausted, like, badass, like, powerful Gail that I want. But, like, so for instance, like, another moment is, like, whenever they throw Amber over the counter, like, in Nev's delivery of that line, the way that they're shooting Nev, it just, I don't even feel like we're connecting with Sidney, It's weird. It's just interesting, They do great work with Jenna Ortega, not with the Melissa Barrera in Scream 5, It's, a lot of people think that it's a bad performance. Dermot Mulrooney in Scream 6, awful, But they fixed the Melissa Barrera problem. It's just like the inconsistency, and it's just like, I wonder why. I wonder what makes an actor do well with one actor do well with a director, but another actor not. It's just, it's interesting.
Yeah, I think that it might be because they have to, right? They like dual direct.
Yeah.
And I also think, like, because for me, it might be just energies as well. Like, I feel like Melissa Barrera first, like, they didn't do a good job directing her, because I think that she just can't really sell, like, scared and afraid. I'm sorry. It doesn't seem to be her vibe. Like, you know what I mean? Like, maybe that's what convinced them to cast her as Sam, because they felt like she could do, the girl boss thing, but can't do, So I don't know. It's a very interesting question, because you're right. There's so many inconsistencies throughout. I don't know. It's so hard to speak to, because I think part of it is the actor, part of it is chemistry, and another part of it is actors and how comfortable they feel asking for direction, and whether that direction is, provided. Because I know that everyone who worked with Wes always comments on that he was open to whatever anyone wanted to do, and he would have conversations with people. On other sets, that's not quite the case, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe there was some confusion. Do I go to one director or the other for something? Who knows?
And, like, it's interesting because, like, it takes Scream 6, even Courtney, okay? Like, I think she, in her phone call scene, her acting is flawless. Like there isn't anything like I would give her a note about. If I could change one thing about the phone call, I would have it linger on the Dewey of it all more. I would have had more dialogue with Gail and Ghostface going back and forth about Dewey's death. Like, I feel like it's cut a little short, and I would have given Gail a bigger moment to cry and a bigger moment of release before the action really took place. Otherwise, flawless. She's flawless in that scene. Compare that to the police station outside the precinct. I don't even believe that scene is real. To me, it's a bad dream. This guy is like, I don't want to believe that it's real. I don't want to believe that's the one of 3 scenes we get of Gail Weathers in Scream 6.
Yeah, and it's once again, like, it's made it even worse because it's copying the homework once again, right? Let's do what Sidney and Gail used to do. Like, like with this trading blows situation, it's like, what elevates Tara to be able to punch her? You know what I mean? Like, you would think it would be Sam that would do that. And it just like, to me, is like disrespectful to the legacy and just having something happen because shouldn't that happen for some reason? It feels so nonsensical. Why is she showing up like she hasn't, like, gone up in the world career wise? It's all wrong. And to me, that scene is just so offensive. That's where we get the Sidney explanation and all of it. It's like, and then fucking like Tara has that horrific line towards her, like something about like needing Ghostface to like matter. I'm like, girl, like what? Like, do we even like Gail anymore? Like, what's happening? It's almost as if they're trying to convince the audience that Gail is this shitty character that shouldn't be here.
I can't believe that we end Gail's big ending in Scream 5, which is beautiful, is the idea that she's going to write a book about Dewey. And that book is not mentioned at all. It's almost like they forgot that they put that in the movie, or it's almost like that they filmed like 3 different versions of the ending, and that's the one that they went with, but they forgot. They thought that it was another version of the ending. That's how it's treated. I just, I think that we deserve an answer there. I don't know.
I think that it's even more cynical than that. I think that they don't know. Like I said, I don't think they were ever really big fans of Scream. I don't think they really do ever understood these characters, and they didn't know how to evolve Gail. So that's why they did the hard reset, because they didn't know how to deal with her outside of her being Gail.
Yeah.
This was a massive change for Gail. We've seen her have loss, yes, and probably Randy is probably the most significant loss for her, because that's where the arc change comes. Dewey is like this big loss. You know what I mean? And I love the work that Courtney does because, like, especially in Scream 3, how concerned she is for Sidney. It kind of lets you know, like, Sidney matters. Like, they've become this small, like, really weird family type unit. Even though they're separate, they care deeply for each other. So I don't think they quite knew what to do with Gail. I don't really think they're good writers.
Yeah.
Not for Scream is weird because it's horror, yes, but it's also a drama.
Yeah.
That's one of the main draws. So if you can't write like character arcs or character drama and interactions and stuff, then you're not going to do well as a screenwriter, in my opinion.
And I hope that, like, just to kind of like start to kind of wind down the conversation here, is like that by having Kevin on board, and that Kevin is the lead writer credit of Scream 7, that he brought that history and that drama to the characters. I mean, like, that to me, like, that's the most important thing. I mean, when it comes to Sidney and Gail, but also like building all the other characters, I think it's so important. And I hope that, like, more than anything, that is what is kind of achieved, because otherwise, if this is just like another version of like the Scream 6 character, it's just in a different, sheep's clothing, like, it's just like, it'll be a bust, I think, too. So
yeah, I agree, especially since if you think about the Scream, even like the side characters of Scream 6 are super weak too.
yeah.
Like Annika only stands out because the actress was able to inject some humanity just before her death when she makes that joke.
Yeah.
But that's up to an actor,
Right.
Otherwise the writing wasn't there for her.
Mm-hmm.
She barely had any lines. So I'm hoping to see well, we know he can do this, right? Like, he's going to be able to write more interesting characters to surround, Tatum and Sidney and Gail with, and have them be deeper. Like, what I really want to see from this film is I want to see enough confidence. We've been seeing a lot of confidence, in my opinion, from the trailer and stuff. So I would like going to this film that we see confidence in, like, sowing the seeds for the story to come.
Yeah.
I think that they've earned that by now.
Confidence, I want to add to that, is like, I want to see commitment. I want to feel like Neve Campbell and Kevin Williamson are acting as though they were born to do this story. Even though, like, you take Wes Craven, like, I think that the way that he approached Scream 2 and 3, he approached that like, I was born to do this story with this mythology. And it comes out in the audio commentaries, which I also did an episode on recently. I think that will be the key to Scream 7 really being the movie that we all want it to be.
Yeah, I think that ownership is so important. And I think they feel that. I think the real question is the studio going to get out of the way and allow them to realize that? Which at this point, I feel like they're desperate enough to do so.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Jess, this was a really wonderful conversation. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, no problem. Always.
All copyrighted material used or referenced in this show belong to their rightful owners and made possible by the Fair Use Act.
And number 3, never, ever, ever, under any circumstances say, I'll be right back. Because you won't be back.
Get another beer, you want one?
Yeah, sure.
I'll be right back!